Kirby Atwell, how are you, sir?
Great. Awesome to be here, Stu. Thanks for having me, man.
I am excited about this conversation. If you could maybe just start with taking your sweatshirt off, that'd be
Yeah.
probably a whole lot better. Just
Man, it's
maybe I
brand
hit
new gear.
like pause, we'll restart, take that off, and then we can go again.
The shield of Athena, I think. Highly respected and regarded across everywhere except one place.
Yeah, all right, I'll let you wear it. I'll let you hold it for just a little bit longer. Well, dude, good to have you on. I love, having conversation with you. You always bring good ideas and education, and you've just been doing some really cool stuff. So let's get into it. For all the military investors and entrepreneurs out there that are watching this, first, just give us a little bit of background about who you are and what you do, where you came from.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's great to be here. And so I guess I'll start with I left the military. I was an Army officer. I left the military in 2011. So I'd gone to West Point, read the gateway drug into real estate investing, which is Rich Dad Poor Dad, when I was
Nice.
in the military, like 90% other people who
Yeah.
that's their genesis. But I was always kind of like entrepreneurial. And so after reading that book, I was like, okay, real estate is the direction I want to go, which ironically, it's not even a real estate book. I had Robert
Yeah.
Kiyosaki on my podcast and asked him about it. And he's like, it's not even a real estate book, but everyone
Nice.
says that. Um, but yeah, so in 2011 got out and I was like, I know real estate. I want to do real estate full time. So jumped into it, thought I'd have this like straight line to success, and it was not that at all. I
Mm.
went from being the commander of a homeland defense site overseas and in charge of 100 guys to moving into my parents' basement and saying I was a real estate investor who had never done any deals really and struggling to get anything going. And I was going to business school at night trying to like learn and it took a while. And so eventually, and also like, the whole transition, I was ready to get out, but it was just you're creating this whole new identity at the same time. So eventually I partnered with a couple friends and we thought flipping would be the way to go. Cause like,
Okay.
it seemed makes sense. Like you buy something cheap, fix it up, sell it, you make a bunch of money. What
Easy.
what could go wrong, right?
What could
And
go wrong?
so we did a deal, and actually the first one went fairly well, and we made some money. And so then we started doing multiple deals, and then we did what a lot of entrepreneurs do, and you got to look the part. So you get an office, and then you start hiring a staff, and people are telling you, well, you need to send out marketing. And so we're doing like, I mean, at one point we're sending tens of thousands of dollars of mailers out on a monthly basis because everything we did required us to do more deals to pay the overhead to in order to do more deals. And so we created this perpetual cycle of
Mm.
sort of like a treadmill business where it was all transactional. We didn't own any assets. We owned houses, but they weren't paying us anything. It was just like we're
You created a job for yourself.
yeah, yeah. And they weren't really assets because we didn't have cash flow from them. So yeah, so after about 4 or 5 years of doing this, we had flipped about 70 houses and taken on some big projects, and it was just high stress. And I knew I'd be on this treadmill forever. So that's when I transitioned into rentals, and then eventually a few years later into this niche that I'm in now of really high cash flowing specific type of short-term rental.
Yeah, we have such a similar story, which is why I really like having these conversations.
Yeah.
Because we were on a similar
Right.
path, right? Doing the flipping, and we were doing kind of turnkey
Yeah.
thing, but we were selling them all. We weren't keeping any of them for
hmm
ourselves. And yeah, it was stressful, man. Like it's a roller coaster. You don't know where the next deal is going to come from or the next paycheck, and you're planning
Yeah.
on one selling to use that cash to go buy another deal, and then of course something happens, right? It doesn't close on time. Um,
Yeah.
Going
You
back
can
a
never
little
get
bit,
ahead that way.
yeah, dude. Um, I'm just curious. So, like, you said you read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that got
Mhm.
you hooked on real estate, but it's not really even a real estate book. Like, what was it? Like that transition out of the military, you said you're living in your your parents' basement. Like,
hmm
what was it about real estate? Why real estate that really wanted to get you, going down that direction?
Yeah. Great question. And I questioned myself on this a lot because I remember distinctly I had a buddy who worked for Salesforce and was doing really well. And he's like, "Hey, I just came across this guy who went to West Point, and I work with him at Salesforce, and he's doing really well. And he lives in the city. You know, you should link up with him." And he was like a year or two behind me or ahead of me. So I went to the city, met up with him, and I remember this was like probably like 2 years into doing the flipping business. And I went to he was living in this really nice apartment, had this really good looking girlfriend, making really great money at Salesforce. And I pulled up in my Hyundai, like barely able to buy groceries at the time. And like, he's like, "So what are you doing?" Like he's like, "So you're doing this real estate thing?" And I remember leaving there feeling like, man, am I the biggest dumbass in the world? Like I could go out and work with one of these headhunters and be getting a six-figure job like he has. And instead I'm going back to my parents' basement and barely able to make ends meet. Like, does this make any sense? And so I think what drew me to it was that the long-term upside. Like I kept telling myself, like, okay, if I stick with it and I figure this out, I can own assets that literally like give me the ability to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And so fast forward, like I talk to people almost daily now who have had a lot of success in their W-2 jobs, in those roles similar to that guy, and they're petrified right now. Like they're like, if I lose this job, my lifestyle has inflated right along with my paycheck. I may be
Mm,
making $200,000-300,000 a year now. I have a great 401k. If that income goes away, though, I'm broke overnight and I'm living off
mm,
my savings. I have no other form of income. And they're like, it seems like you don't go to work every day. Like you just have income coming in. Like, how can I do that? And so everyone wants to start at the end, but there is a process. You got to start accumulating assets. And I think that was to answer your question, I guess that was what got me so attracted to it, is the
yeah.
long-term potential.
No, I love that, man. Um, yeah, similarly, I get asked all the time, like, what do you do for work?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
that doesn't
exactly.
seem like you do much.
Yeah.
Um, um,
Yeah, I'm
but
still trying to explain it to my kids. Yeah.
yeah, you do have to work for a little bit,
Yeah,
kids.
yeah.
Maybe not. Um, so in your military days, one, tell us what you did in the military, and then how did that help transition? What lessons learned did you have from the military? What skills, what knowledge, really helped you kind of with this new role of, owning real estate?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say the biggest thing like at West Point was just like the time management, I think was
Mm,
one of the biggest things that I learned and the organization. The more my income, like I feel like has gone up in direct proportion with how organized I am. And the less I know, like the more chaotic something feels, the less effective that area of my life is, and the lower the income will be around that particular aspect of whether it's real estate or personal finance or whatever. So I think the fact that when you're at West Point, it was kind of like um, every minute needs to be like you figure out like what's the most effective use of that minute, and
yeah,
efficiency is so key. And so obviously that carries in, and then, the organizational aspect of it. So I think I've noticed, and I'm sure you've probably seen this too, so many military people getting into real estate these days, which I don't think has always been the case, but I think it does. It doesn't seem like a path that would directly lead right into real estate, but I think there's a lot of crossover.
yeah, that's good, man. So you went from military to flipping houses. To then you're like, I need some more assets. Let's go just get some rentals. And
hmm
then to what you're doing now. Could you explain that transition to what you're doing now and what made you go from flips to rentals to what you're doing now?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was doing the flips, realized that was going to be a treadmill I'd never get off of until I died. So I was
Yeah.
like, what I need is income, like cash flow. That's what got me into, interested in real estate in the first place, was financial freedom, which I didn't have any freedom. So started buying some really affordable long-term rentals because I had the flipping or the rehab background. So I was like, I can buy some properties that are really cheap, fix them up, and then just rent them. And I started doing it for the HUD VASH program in the south suburbs of Chicago, which is a program where, homeless veterans can get a voucher, just like a Section 8 voucher. And I would rent the properties out to them. And it was great. I mean, I had some great tenants and, there's always challenges that come along with becoming homeless that you're working through. But overall, it was a great experience. Then we moved from Chicago over to Northwest Indiana and we just tried a short-term rental in our basement this was in 2017. I had just started hearing about, people really like making money with short-term rentals and we had this unfinished basement. So I was like, what's the worst that can happen? So we turned it into a one-bedroom apartment and it just rented out like crazy. And we made $22,000 that first summer. And I was like, I have houses that I own that don't make that an entire year
Yeah.
as long-term rentals, and we just made it on our basement. So
In Northwest Indiana, kind of
yeah,
like,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. In the HUD VASH program didn't work in Northwest Indiana because it's more rural. There's not really many homeless veterans, and the payment standards are so low that it just didn't make sense. So I was kind of looking for a strategy that would work, and it seemed like locally the numbers made sense. When I looked at Airbnb, I was like, what I can buy properties for and what they rent for, it seems like the cash flow is super high compared to long-term rentals. So we just started um, like with a separate property then outside of our basement. And then we realized that if we buy these small multi-units and have increased income per unit, but yet, our costs are really low because they're pretty affordable properties, the cash flow is just phenomenal. And so that's what we really focused in on. And I kind of put blinders on at that point once I saw how well it worked. And we've just built up a portfolio of those ever since.
Wow. That's super cool. And so the niche is short-term rental properties kind of in lower price points around the United States.
So yeah, so we've kind of refined it to where it works the best is throughout the Midwest and Southeast primarily. It can
Okay.
work in any state, but that's the part of the part of the country where properties are pretty much on sale. The price per square foot is really inexpensive. And if you look at a population map, you're going to see high population in New York and LA where price points are super high, but you also see around the Great Lakes really high population
Mm,
where, there's lots of people. Anywhere where there's lots of people, people are traveling. Whether
mm.
it's weddings, funerals, work, business, vacation, whatever it is, people don't think people travel to the Midwest, but there's a lot of travel that's happening here. Then you look at the price points and it's just super inexpensive. So again, like if you buy just outside of the large cities where there's still access to big population, there's still some local draws, you can a lot of times buy a property for a third of the cost. Like we're in Michigan City, Indiana, an hour outside of Chicago. I can buy a 3 unit turnkey for $300,000. It's really nice. That
Wow.
same property would be over $1 million downtown Chicago in a nice neighborhood.
Yeah.
So you're buying it for a fraction, but when you look at the nightly rate and occupancy, it's still close to what I can get downtown Chicago, which doesn't
Mm.
make sense. But when you start to look at it, there's enough local draws here and enough reasons why it's just a supply and demand type thing, and it doesn't correlate with pricing. So you find those situations where you're just outside the city can still get high nightly rate and occupancy, and the cash flow is just really, really good.
And what's drawing people to those locations? Like what's drawing people to stay in those?
Yeah, most people don't think that anyone's going to come to a Michigan City, Indiana, but you don't need to be next to Disney World. Just having, again, being close to population, we get all the non-leisure reasons people travel. So like in the
Okay.
off season, we get a ton of midterm rentals because we'll just, say we'll give you a 25% discount if you book for 30 plus day stays. So people
Mm.
who are traveling for work, they don't want to stay in a hotel. They'd rather stay in a nice, apartment. So we get mostly midterm rentals in the off season. So it books up our off season. And then we don't give any discount in the summertime because we've got Lake Michigan right here and the beach. We've got zoo, we've got an outlet mall, we've got a casino, just little things that like will draw people here for a weekend or a week vacation, um, primarily in the peak season. And so it keeps our occupancy high year round between the leisure and non-leisure travel.
That's great, man. And you guys are managing all of this yourself, or do you have a team, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, with our basement one, my wife had a 1-year-old on her hip when she was cleaning it between every guest, and we'd try to figure it out. We had no idea what we were doing, but we communicated with each guest, we cleaned it, we did everything. As we've scaled organically, we put better systems in place. And I quickly, after a year of being the person who was, I was my own worst enemy, like driving over and like figuring out a lock for people or like helping them get
Yeah,
into their unit when they couldn't figure out the lock, always on a Friday night, when they're
of
checking
course.
in. Uh, I realized, okay, I know people are doing this remotely. What if we just treat these as if they're on the other side of the world? What would
Mm,
that look like? And that changed everything. So then we came up with systems. And so technically we self-manage, but we started adding virtual support. So we have a great on-the-ground team of handyman and cleaners that we hire directly. Um, and then over time, and once we got to like 4 or 5, that's when we brought on our first virtual team member.
okay.
And we pay them $8 an hour. They live in the Philippines and they're phenomenal. Like just
Yeah.
really sharp people, speak perfect English. Our guests think they're right down the street, but they handle all the day to day. So like today is a Friday afternoon. We probably have about 15 check-ins taking place right now because we have 39 different short-term rental listings. And I'm not involved in any of that.
Mm,
So it just it we have systems in place to where the virtual team can handle it. They coordinate with the boots on the ground team. And it's a tiny fraction of what we would pay a property manager for short-term rentals, which is like 20 to 30% typically.
yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I know that drives a lot of people away is the operations side of running Airbnb, short-term rentals, and then, if you do have a property manager, it's, typically what, 20 to 30%
Yeah.
of your and now you're helping others do this, right? Like you're teaching others how to
Mhm.
do this type of investment. Talk about that a
Yeah,
little bit.
exactly. Yeah. So I started a podcast like back in 2020 called Living Off Rentals just because I was like, I just enjoyed talking about this stuff and
Yeah.
I benefited so much from podcasts. I'd always wanted to start one. So I started it, just started talking about what we were doing, interviewing other people who like kind of were in the space. And then that kind of led into over the next few years, people were saying, okay, this is really helpful, but can you teach me like specifically what it is you're doing? So I created this step-by-step process where I do work with people to walk them through the step-by-step and support them personally throughout that whole process um, to get to the place of the highest cash flowing short-term rental possible. That's always the outcome that I'm working with people on using this strategy, and it's been some of the most fulfilling work I've done. I've been doing this over the last 5 years now. Because people literally come back and say it changed my life. Like it allows me to do things that I never would have had the flexibility to do had I not created this type of cash flow. So it's pretty cool.
Dude, so cool. Very cool. So where are you at now? You said you have 39
Yeah.
properties on it? Okay.
Yeah. So when we started this, like after we got the first one beyond our basement, we realized we could make roughly $1,000 per unit of net cash flow after all of our
Mm,
expenses, especially if we bought a small multi-unit. So we were like, okay, if we can get to 8 units, like I'll feel comfortable leaving my full-time job. Because I went back and got a full-time corporate job after I was done flipping because I needed income coming in while I
yeah.
was buying rentals. And so that's what we did. So over the next couple of years in 2021, 5 years ago, I put in my notice because we got to 8 units. And what I didn't understand at the time is how much capacity that would free up. I
Mm,
mean, now 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year for the next 25 years that I would have been working, I own that time now. And so
mm,
it's given us the ability to, even at a pretty leisurely rate, just keep adding a few properties here and there every year. We usually have 1 or 2 projects going at a time. Um, and so now we're up to 39 listings. We just got another 2 unit under contract last week. And so, um, and so I mean, it's built up a substantial income over that time and it's fun. It's like just, it's way different than building a flipping company where it's like, I have to do 4 deals a month just to pay the bills.
yeah.
It's a totally different, stress level.
Well, and we had tried to schedule this a couple weeks ago, and you're like, I'm down in Florida, with my family on the beach at one of our properties that we
Yeah.
own, which so that's a kind of a nice benefit too, right? To you can go and
Yeah.
stay in your own
Yeah.
properties that you own.
Yeah, exactly. After we got to financial freedom in Indiana, the goal was to then have a couple in a warmer climate, that we could use ourselves. So we'll block them off and go down and use it ourselves in South Florida, and it's kind of nice.
That's awesome, man. Well, out of all these investments, what would you say is your best? What would you say is your best investment?
I feel like so my goal always now, it's sort of a game I play where I'm like, I want the next deal to be the best deal. Like I'll only do the next deal if it's, because before it was like I just have to do deals. So we'd kind of compromise on what our deal standards were just to get more deals going. Now it's like I only want to take on a deal if I can do a better deal than I did last time. Uh,
Nice.
so yeah. So I mean, it depends how you look at best. That can be subjective, but there's two that come to mind. So one is one I just recently did like 2 or 3 years ago that was so low cost. We were down in Florida actually, and it popped up because I just have a search on that, for properties that pop up, and it looked like a single family home. And I usually don't, I'm not interested in those, but then I noticed it had an ADU in the backyard, and it was for $94,000, which is really and it was in a nice neighborhood in Michigan City. So I was like, man, this seems really inexpensive. And so it was the day before New Year's Eve. And so I called the agent, and it was a young girl, and she was like, yeah, I called the listing agent directly. And she's like, yeah, they're looking to sell. And so I was like the first one to call her and reach out. And it was right before the holiday. So she got my offer in that night. They accepted on New Year's Eve. And then I came home, and I was pleasantly surprised that it was like livable condition, even though it needed, rehabbing.
Yeah.
So we rehab both the main house and the ADU. And so we were into it for less than 200,000. And it just rents out like crazy. So now we added a bathroom in the main house, so it's a 3-2 in the main house, and then an ADU in the back, and we make I know it's well over 3,000, over $3,000 a month of net cash flow
Wow.
on that one for a $200,000 property. So that's
That's
a
great.
great one. And then we just did a 5 unit in Valparaiso that it looks like this old Victorian house, but it's five separate units inside, and each one
Wow.
makes about $31,000 gross. So that's $155,000 a year on this. We're all into it for just over 600,000.
Wow.
So because it's so low cost, a lot of that's net cash flow. So yeah, these multi units just really work well for that.
That's cool, man. Have you had any zingers in there? Have you had any that just not gone the way you wanted it to go? What about your worst investment?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Man,
We
yeah,
all
it's
have our
funny.
stories, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's so many that could compete from back in the day. That I think so that again, going back to like flipping properties, the mindset behind it. So we did one that was great. It was like a pretty low cost mid tier property. And so we started doing some of those, and then you look at the spreadsheet and you're like, okay, if I can make the same percentage on $1 million house, that's even better. Or a multi-million dollar house, And what we didn't realize is that, a stainless steel refrigerator in a 200 or $300,000 house is maybe, I don't know, $1,000 or something. But then the Sub-Zero isn't like double the cost. It's 10 times the
Yeah.
cost of that
Yeah.
refrigerator. So like you start thinking like, oh, it's going to be easy. But like, and then the buyer pool is not like just a little bit smaller. It's like a lot smaller. And these people are extremely picky. They
Mm.
they can buy whatever house they want. So our punch list would come back and it'd be 50 grand worth of work as opposed to, our $300,000 property. We just had to tweak a few things. So we would do these big projects where like we were doing a pop top, where you'd buy a
Yeah.
ranch and then you'd add a second story, which is a huge project. And then you're working with so many contractors because you had so many deals going. So there was a few in Chicago. There's a reason why I don't invest in Chicago anymore. I mean, it
Yeah.
was just like between the city corruption and then the contractors and the scope of these properties and the buyers, like it was just a perfect storm of,
Mm.
it looked good on paper again.
Of
But,
course.
I would recommend to people start with properties that just are really affordable, turnkey, that you can find a competitive advantage, whether it's short-term rentals or maybe like group homes or maybe a elderly care facility or something like that, where the income is pretty high, but you can buy something relatively affordable. And I think that's the recipe for success, not speculating on these massive projects.
Yeah, that's good, man. Well, you might have just hit it, but if you were to go back and kind of start over, what would you tell your younger self? What would you tell your, self right out of getting out of the army, and what would you do differently?
Yeah, that's a good question. There was sort of a turning point for me after I got married. My wife and I really started like talking about what we wanted our life to actually look like in our days. There's a stoic principle like a good life is just made up of good days, right? And so
Mm.
if you think about what that means, it means like you string together, like figure out what your perfect day looks like and just string together as many of those as possible. And
Yeah,
and then you look back and you're like, I had a good life. It's not like you grind it out for the next 40 years doing something you hate so that you can retire and then you're going to look back and say, man, that was such a great life. Um,
right.
so I that resonated with me. And so we started really talking about like what we want our what game is it we're playing and what's the outcome we're after specifically, not just like what social media tells you success looks like. And we
Mm.
realized we did not care at all about luxury or what cars we drove or anything like that. We wanted to live on a farm, which we didn't even realize initially. As we talked about it, we're like, yeah, it'd be cool to live on a farm and kind of grow our own food and, um, you know, have an impact on others and be able to focus on our health and fitness and stuff like that, which was really important to us. And so we realized that financial freedom was going to be a part of that, but it didn't require us to get to this massive number that we initially were kind of expecting. And so we could backwards plan from there. And so I'd say if I could go back, instead of for the first 5 years, I never did that. I just chased what I thought success looked like, and
Mm.
it was typically like material things that, people think of as success. And then I realized I don't care about any of that. So get clear on what your version of financial freedom looks like so that you have a way to make decisions and you can backwards plan from. And it's amazing how many people I talk to who are seemingly very successful. And I'm like, so what's the outcome? Like, what's your day? What's your ideal day? And they're like, well, it's more. The outcome's more. Like, I'm doing this so I can get to 20 properties so that then I can invest in big properties and then I can, get into private equity and then I can, and I'm like, okay, and then what? And at the end of it, it's like, well, then I can hopefully make more until I die. And it's like, more is never going to get you to an outcome that you know, that gives you satisfaction. So,
Yeah, I love that,
uh,
man.
yeah,
Have you
it's
have you heard of the Mexican fisherman story?
yes. Yeah, I love that. I
Just
love
that,
that.
man, right? Just
Exactly. Yeah.
that's good,
Yeah.
dude.
You should tell it though, because some people probably haven't heard it.
I'm gonna make people go look it up.
Yeah.
Make people go
That's,
look at it.
yep.
Go
Okay.
look up the Mexican fisherman
It's a good
story.
one. It's a good
Yeah,
one.
it is. All right, last question for you. For our audience, for the Military Investor Network, um, what would you ask of them? What advice would you give them? What would you ask them to go do? Feel free to plug, whatever you got, your podcast, tell us about your coaching. What would you ask of? This is your chance to shine.
Yeah. So I'd say if I'm going to ask him to do something, there's a book that I read that there's actually two of them by the same author, kind of back to back. Um, The first one's Essentialism. So if you read that, it's by Greg McCune. I've read it like every year for like the last decade. Then
Yeah.
he wrote a follow-up called um, I'm
Four
drawing a
disciplines of
blank on the name.
execution. Is that it?
No, it's called Essentialism and uh, you can look it up though.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the
I think I know
premise
what you're talking about.
behind the second book it talks about residual versus linear outcomes. And
Okay.
and this principle really just like resonated with me. And that most of the things that people do have linear outcomes. So you go to work, you get paid a paycheck, and that's the end of it, right? Like that's the outcome that you get. There's nothing that is like it continues on past that. You've worked the time that gives you that paycheck. With residual things
Is
like
it effortless?
effortless, that's it.
Yeah.
Yep. So with residual things like if you invest in, say, a rental property, like it keeps paying you into the future, or like,
Mm,
if you have royalties on something. So, and that works with relationships too. Like there's a lot of things that you don't think of as either linear or residual, but once you start thinking through that lens and you focus on things that bring residual results, um,
mm.
I feel like your level of success increases substantially. So I would say go read those two books. I think they're
Okay.
super helpful. And then if you are interested in what I'm doing, Living Off Rentals is the platform. There's a web class I recently did. If you go to livingoffrentals.com/start, and it walks you through my whole strategy and example deals and thought process. So you could check that out as well.
I love it, dude. And I'll put that in the show notes for sure.
Cool.
Um, man, this is fun. I
Yeah.
appreciate you being a part of the Military Investor Network. I appreciate I mean you've given some presentations and some education inside the group and kind of just blew my mind and got me interested and excited about looking more into this, what you're doing, and just appreciate being a part of your network and continuing to learn from
Yeah.
you, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you for starting the Military Investor Network too. It's an awesome group of people, and I love all the different perspectives in there. So thank you.
Yeah. All right, buddy. Well, thank you. See ya.
See ya.